Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome. And if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today we are returning to our Gloomhaven character builds with the Jaws of the Lion characters. Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is a small standalone game/expansion for the Gloomhaven series. It was meant to serve as more of an introduction to the series itself. To keep up this introduction type theme, I am considering these builds to be part of their own mini-series. I'm only going to be going to level 10 for the breakdowns of these builds in particular, and in the final summary we'll talk about what the full 20 levels could look like, but for the actual level by level section, we're only covering the first 10. I'm hoping that this will make the character builds more digestible, and allow me to spend more time on things like the background of Gloomhaven, some mechanics of the game, and why we're making the choices in D&D that we are. Today, we are looking at making the Demolitionist from Jaws of the Lion. This is our third of the 4 Jaws of the Lion characters, and the Demolitionist is, between all the other characters, kind of an in-between of a tank as well as a battlefield controller. They do also pump out a fair bit of damage, but they really excel at battlefield control overall. They have a lot of access to push, where they're going to run up, melee attack an enemy, and then send that enemy flying. If that enemy happens to hit a wall or an obstacle or perhaps even another character, then that enemy also is going to take extra damage. This really lets the Demolitionist play around with the actual environment of the scenario and use the objects or setting around them in order to usually deal more damage, perhaps destroy specific objective-driven obstacles. Sometimes there will be a scenario where you're supposed to just break a few obstacles, and the Demolition is amazing at that. Thematically, the Demolitionist isn't just someone who's big, strong, and likes to wreck things. They're actually a tiny Quattro character that is so intelligent that they have created their own inventions that help them wreck things that are in their way. I'm going to end up putting a little minor spoiler now, because like our other Jaws of the Lion character builds, there are spoilers for some of these characters, where at level 5, they unlock a character-specific card that can alter their playstyle, or at least give them a little miniature to use in a scenario. Normally I would give the spoiler alert at the beginning of the video, and then a little bit later on. But I'm going to talk about what they get right here, because it's something that we're going to know that we're going to want to build for. So, without any further ado, if you don't want to have any spoilers for the Demolitionist specifically and what they get at level 5, I would recommend skipping this portion of the video and then skipping the summary, because I'll talk about that later, as well as I'll bring the spoiler back for when we actually unlock what they're going to get. But if you don't care about spoilers, or you're just curious to see what the character is actually going to get that's going to fit into our build, feel free to keep watching. I'll pause now for a quick second, but then we're going to continue with it. Okay, with that minor spoiler out of the way, what we get is a full-on mech suit. See, the Demolitionist normally starts off with their own piston fists, which are like mechanical punching fists designed to destroy obstacles in their path. Eventually, they upgrade that to get a full mech suit, which makes them a little bit more durable and just thematically feel more mechanical and more like an inventor. This is actually going to be something that we're going to want to work towards with our character build. All in all, what we're going to want is a lot of push type effects to mimic the push mechanic in Gloomhaven. We're going to want our mech suit. We're going to want to be really good at melee punching, and we're going to hopefully try and pick up some environment destruction as well, if possible. That's a little bit rarer in D&D, so we'll see if we really can. Before we jump into the build though, let's look at their flavor text. Even when augmenting themselves with machines of their own creation to destroy anything that stands in their path, Quattros will still do it with charm and flair. Though they may be small, Demolitionists don't let that hold them back in the least. Between their rocket boots, multitude of bombs, and giant piston fists, they are a force to be reckoned with. Sometimes the only path forward is the one they create themselves. In such cases, it is best just to get out of their way. Starting now at character creation with our lineage, we're going to be a custom lineage. We are a Quattro, which is a unique small folk lineage. It was the same as what our Tinkerer was, as well as our Music Note class. We're going to choose to be small when we pick custom lineage, because we can choose between small and medium, and this is purely for theme. You don't have to, but I'm going to say that we are because it fits the Quattro lineage. Then we also get to pick an extra skill or dark vision, and we're going to go with an extra skill because as we said with other quattrals, it feels more appropriate that they are extra skilled and capable of inventing things to let them see in the dark, rather than just naturally seeing in the dark as a lineage. Finally, we're going to gain a free feat. And for our free feat, we're going to want to pick up the Crusher feat. The Crusher feat is an amazing half feat that works around bludgeoning damage. As a half feat, we can improve either our strength or our constitution by +1, and then we also gain bonuses, like I said, when dealing bludgeoning damage or landing a critical hit that deals bludgeoning damage as well. It gives us an on-demand, once per turn, push effect of 5 feet whenever we hit a creature with bludgeoning damage. And that's what we want right away. The big thing about being the Demolitionist is the ability to push enemies around the battlefield and hopefully push them into walls. I don't know if we'll actually be able to mimic that aspect of getting extra damage for pushing enemies into things in D&D. If your DM's nice, they might just add it on anyways. But mechanically speaking, that's going to be hard to mimic. Push itself, though, that we can definitely do, and we've done it right away at level 1. For our stats, we want our strength and intelligence of all things to be our main 2 stats, followed by a bit of constitution to make sure that we can take a hit from time to time. We're going to put 9 points into strength, giving us a 15 there from point by. And we're going to leave dexterity at 8, so that's 0 points into that. But we're going to put 7 points into both constitution and intelligence to give us a total ability score of 14 in each of those. Then we're going to put 2 points into both wisdom and charisma to give us 10 in each of those scores as well. The +2 that we gain from custom lineage into intelligence, bringing it to a total of 16. And we'll put the +1 from the Crusher feat into strength, giving that a total of 16 as well. You can feel free to change around any of these stats and ability scores if you would like to. We probably just want to try and keep strength, intelligence, and constitution relatively high since they're our primary ones. Finally, for our background, we're going to pick anything that really has to do with breaking things. Honestly, there's no right or wrong background for this, so pick anything that just feels like it would work thematically. At level 1, we're going to start off as a fighter. So right away, as always as a level 1 fighter, we're going to gain Second Wind, which is a really nice bonus action self-heal that just does a d10 plus your fighter level in hit points. The other thing that we get at level 1 is our fighting style, and right away we're going to want to pick unarmed fighting for our fighting style. This will let us use a d6 for our unarmed strikes instead of just the regular strength modifier +1. And it gives us a bonus to damage when grappling enemies. We're not really worried about the grappling part just yet, but the extra damage dice of a d6, or actually a d8 if we're not wielding a weapon or a shield in either hand, is really going to come in handy. Demolitionist just likes punching things, and this is how we're going to get to do it for at least the first few levels. At level 2, we're going to be a Fighter 2, and we gain Action Surge. Action Surge just gives us a little bit more action economy on any one given turn, giving us an extra attack action, which is primarily what we're going to use it for. Or you could always dash, dodge, disengage, hide, anything else that costs an action. At level 3, we are going to make the jump over to Artificer. Artificer at level 1 only really gives us magical tinkering, which isn't really too important for us, and it also gives us spell casting. You can pick up any cantrips or spells that you would like. There's none that are really imperative for this build, to be honest. We mostly want the features that our Artificer will get eventually, not the actual spells. We also want to focus a bit into environmental damage. Any sort of spell or cantrip that will deal extra damage to a structure, object, or just the environment in general would be thematically good to pick up. At level 4, we gain the Artificer's main mechanic of infusions. Right away we'll know 4 infusions, but you can make 2 infused items. The items you choose early aren't too important right now, and the infusions also aren't really important, so honestly, pick your favorites. You can keep them for yourself if you want, or you can give them away to your teammates, but really, at this point, it's all up to you. I'd recommend probably making our armor magical, that way we have a little bit of a higher AC, making us more durable, but you could reasonably pick anything and get away with it. Level 5, we're an Artificer 3, and here we gain our Artificer subclass. We are going to be an Armorer Artificer. Not only does the Armorer Artificer have the features that we want to actually be able to mimic the Demolitionist, they also have the spells. At 5th level, they'll gain Shatter, which is the probably most notable or most accessible spell to be able to deal damage to the environment. So that's just a really nice bonus. The main reason we want to go Armorer, though, is for the Arcane Armor. That doesn't have a lot of benefit on its own, other than the fact that we also unlock the Arcane Model feature. With Armor Model, we can then customize our Arcane Armor itself. When we do so, we can choose one of the two armor models that we get, Guardian or Infiltrator. For us, we're only using Guardian. We are not worried about Infiltrator because we're a Demolitionist who's meant to go in loud and proud to any sort of combat scenario. We're not really worried about the stealth or ranged abilities that Infiltrator gets us. For our Guardian model, we gain Thunder Gauntlets as well as a defensive field. The defensive field is a little bonus action. We gain temporary hit points equal to our level in the class. We can use that bonus action a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus. This is a really nice way to gain the Gloomhaven shield effect, which, as I've talked about in other videos, in Gloomhaven that's just straight damage reduction, but for the purposes of mimicking that in D&D, temporary health works very well, especially temporary health that you can actually refresh over and over again. Thunder Gauntlets, on the other hand, are really nice weapons. Not only does the Armor Gauntlet count as a simple melee weapon when we're not holding anything in it, it also deals 1d8 thunder damage on a hit. And then also a creature that does get hit by the Thunder Gauntlet has disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than you until the start of your next turn. This is where the interesting part of this build really comes into play. See, with unarmed fighting, our fists already did a d8 of damage, assuming we weren't holding anything in one of those two hands. Now with Thunder Gauntlets, we still do a d8, but it does thunder damage. We took Crusher, which is all about using bludgeoning damage in order to activate our push effect. Now it's really up to you to choose which type of damage you want to use. I would assume that if your DM is generous, although maybe they're not, but it kind of makes sense that when you're attacking with your Thunder Gauntlets, you could choose whether to actually activate the thunder portion of them or just straight up punch an enemy. In that case, you would be able to choose whether you want to push an enemy 5 feet or hit them with your Thunder Gauntlet and cause them to have disadvantage against everyone other than you, activating a sort of minor taunt-like feature, basically allowing us to tank some of the damage that might otherwise go towards our enemies. The one thing I will mention from our infusions is that because the Thunder Gauntlets count as melee weapons, we should hopefully be able to infuse them with our magical infusions that boosts a weapon. That, I would hope, would allow us to make our Thunder Gauntlet count as magical, which normally wouldn't do too much since it already deals thunder damage, but because it's a gauntlet and we could choose to punch with it normally instead of punching with it with thunder, I would hope that that would mean that our regular unarmed strike would then count as magical for the purposes of overcoming damage and resistance. That again is a call for your DM to make, but logically it makes sense that if you punch him with a magical gauntlet and you don't activate the thunder, it still counts as magic damage. Level 6, we're an Artificer 4, and here we're going to get an ASI/feat. All we're going to do is use the ASI, or Ability Score Improvement, to do exactly that, improve our ability scores. Now, even though we have a 16 intelligence and some of our features could scale off of intelligence, we're going to improve strength, and that's what we're going to really improve until we cap it for our first few ability score improvements. We're just going to bump our strength by 2, getting it to 18, because our strength can work off of both the Thunder Gauntlets themselves as well as our regular punching. We can then just wail on enemies with our pure strength to our heart's desire. At level 7, we're an Artificer 5, and as an Artificer 5, we just gain extra attack. At level 8, we are now jumping back to Fighter, and we are a Fighter 3. Fighter 3, we get to pick our Fighter subclass, and we are going to pick Rune Knight. Gain the Rune Carver feature, which allows us to pick a few different giant runes. We get 2 of them that we know right now. We can carve those into weapons, armor, a shield, jewelry, really anything that we're wearing or could hold. And since we're not really wanting to hold anything because we want to punch with our fists, that's probably just going to be our suit of armor or anything else that we're wearing, really. Back with our spoiler warning again, this is key to what we unlock at level 5. So if you don't want any spoilers, skip ahead once again. For what we actually get here from Giant's Might, this allows us to become size large. It also gives us advantage on strength checks and saving throws, again helping athletics/grappling. And we also gain an extra d6 of damage once per turn to an enemy when we hit them with a weapon attack or unarmed strike. This is our mech suit, essentially. Instead of just us growing to become size large, I like to think of it as maybe dropping down from the sky like any good video game mech does, and us just jumping in, taking on that large size form and then having that extra damage as well as the advantage on strength checks and saves to be able to just go to town against our enemies. Level 9, we are up to Fighter 4, and here we're just going to increase our strength by +2 again to cap it at 20. Once again, we're just using strength for most of our punches, whether that's Thunder Gauntlets or our regular fists. And so we want our strength to be as high as possible. Finally, at level 10, we are now a Fighter 5, and we just gain extra attack once again, which is completely useless because we already have it. Nothing to say here, but there will be more to say about the rest of the build in a second. Okay, time to summarize the build and talk about what we get after level 10. For the rest of our levels after level 10, we can pretty much divide them however we want. I personally would recommend Fighter 11 and Artificer 9 to give us some extra infusions on our armor, because as an armorer, we actually gain 2 extra infusions that we can make overall, but they have to go to our suit of armor. And then also your armor divides for the purposes of infusions. You can do one on your helmet, on your boots, on your actual torso, and on your gauntlets. Which of course, we always want our weapon infusion on our gauntlets to hopefully let our regular unarmed strikes count as magical. Things like the Battlemaster maneuvers, which we would have to pick up through feats since we didn't take Battlemaster as our subclass. But reasonably, we could take something like Pushing Attack as a Battlemaster maneuver from the Martial Adept feat, and that would just let us add on extra push distance to our regular unarmed strikes. So if we really wanted to send an enemy flying into a wall, we totally could. Other options for things that we could increase or gain feats for would be grappling, of course. Something that synergizes with grappling itself would allow us to also try and lock down an enemy, providing us more battlefield control and technically making us tankier because we're protecting our allies from the enemies in front of us. Also, it would be pretty funny to just walk up as this tiny quattro creature, grab an enemy, and just start wailing on them with a bunch of jabs. And if you really wanted to make sure that they couldn't get away, Sentinel is always a great option too. Overall, we're a pretty reasonable tank build. We have battlefield control / the push effect. We have a minor taunt-like feature. We have a plethora of attacks. And I haven't even really mentioned too many Gloomhaven specific conditions that we would want to mimic, because there really aren't that many conditions that the Demolitionist has access to besides push. Again, environmental damage shows up a lot, so if you did pick up Shatter or maybe some other spells to deal environmental damage, that's always great too. So I have our runes and our giant form from the Rune Knight subclass, which really makes us feel like we are inside of our mech suit and can give us more durability once we can get the Hill Giant rune as well, which is really awesome to have. On top of all that, like our shatter and environmental damage, we just have good utility-based spellcasting that can be useful both inside and outside of combat. It might not be great for mimicking Gloomhaven all the time, but it's great for D&D purposes. We're a pretty close representation of the Demolitionist from Jaws of the Lion, and we're at least going to have lots of fun punching enemies and sending them flying across the battlefield. Let me know what you thought of the build or what you would do to get closer to the theme of the Jaws of the Lion character class. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.